There are nights when prayer feels less like devotion and more like speaking into an abandoned universe. No answer arrives, no sign appears. The silence can feel cruel. Yet, what if Sophia's silence is not absence, but a change in the direction from which the answer must be heard? The old prayer looks upward and waits for intervention. The Gnostic prayer descends beneath the noise of the personality and searches for the spark hidden there before the cry began. Today, we enter that silence, not to force it to speak, but to discover what it has been asking you to become. The next movement opens through an empty sky above a person who has run out of words. Behind it stands Sophia's hidden presence and the luminous spark in the secret book of John, yet the test belongs to lived experience. What if the silence is changing the location of prayer? A useful Gnostic interpretation should produce greater discernment, steadier responsibility, and a more exact relationship with reality. The narrative can be felt in a single scene. Picture an empty sky above a person who has run out of words. The soul tries the familiar response and receives the familiar result. Then the memory preserved within Sophia's hidden presence and the luminous spark in the secret book of John introduces a possibility the closed system cannot explain. A different choice becomes imaginable, and the architecture of inevitability develops its first crack. The emotional mechanism is precise. Silence feels like abandonment when prayer has been trained to recognize only external intervention. This is why the seeker can possess information and still remain unable to move. The blockage is not lack of intelligence. It is the conversion of a living human capacity into a defense that no longer knows when its work is finished. Sophia's light does not humiliate that defense. It reveals the moment when protection became confinement. There is relief in discovering that the conflict has a structure. Relief must not become passivity, but it can end the belief that you are uniquely incapable of change. The pattern was learned, reinforced, and rewarded. For that reason, it can also be observed, interrupted, and gradually reorganized. In this movement of Sophia's silence, the next honest inquiry is, what if the silence is changing the location of prayer? And what I am about to reveal has layers that a single video cannot contain. For those who have been watching this channel and sensing that the fragments are pointing to something larger, the complete initiation exists. It is in the pinned comment. But stay with me now, because this next part changes everything. Names such as Sophia, Pleroma, Epinoia, Pneuma, and Archon should not be used as decorations. Within the textual horizon of Sophia's hidden presence and the luminous spark in the secret book of John, these names belong to a network of metaphysical relationships. When we bring them into present experience, we must preserve that depth. Otherwise, a demanding tradition becomes a collection of dramatic labels placed over ordinary reactions. Authority here comes from naming the boundary. The ancient witness is Sophia's hidden presence and the luminous spark in the secret book of John. The modern framework is an empty sky above a person who has run out of words. One does not prove the other in a scientific sense. Together they create a disciplined mirror in which the seeker can test experience without abandoning reason or flattening myth into mere psychology. The micro-experience is simple. Close the eyes for one breath and imagine an empty sky above a person who has run out of words. Then open them and identify one object in the room. This movement between symbol and ordinary reality protects the practice from dissociation. Gnose should deepen presence, not make the immediate world disappear. Practice the descent of attention. Begin with one slow breath and bring the question into the body. What if the silence is changing the location of prayer? Do not search for a dramatic message. Notice the first contraction, image, memory, or impulse that appears. Write one sentence describing what you observed, then one sentence naming the smallest action that would honor the observation. The practice becomes real only when it changes a choice. This is where belonging becomes important. Few people can sustain difficult recognition entirely alone, yet belonging must support awakening rather than reward performance. A true sanctuary does not tell the seeker what every experience means. It provides enough safety, study, and continuity for the seeker to become more exact in discovering meaning. In this video, that continuity serves the journey through Sophia's silence. Do not leave the question here. The next movement asks what happens after the insight when the ordinary world demands the old response again. That is where information either becomes initiation or returns to sleep. The next test is the error of external petition. Stay with the distinction inside Sophia's silence. A teaching becomes initiatory when it can survive ordinary time, correction, and consequence. The practice of the descent of attention asks whether the question, "What if the silence is changing the location of prayer?" can become a stable way of seeing and choosing. We now approach the error of external petition. The next revelation matters because it shows how an obstacle can borrow the energy of a legitimate human need. Hold a message sent repeatedly to an address that was never the destination in the mind. Place beside it the demiurge's lower order and the Gnostic critique of external authority. One belongs to our present language, the other to the surviving tradition. Their meeting creates a question. What does desperation ask the outer world to do in your place? The journey changes when the soul encounters the truth from within rather than receiving it only as doctrine. Read the scene as a story of consciousness. The scene presents a message sent repeatedly to an address that was never the destination. At first, the seeker assumes the obstacle is external. Then the textual world of the demiurge's lower order and the Gnostic critique of external authority changes the scale of the problem. The governing structure is not only around the seeker. It has taught the seeker how to interpret experience. The first liberation is therefore a change in seeing before it becomes a change in circumstance. At the center of this stage is one difficult fact. Petition becomes a trap when it gives away the very capacity through which an answer could take form. A person may call the result fate, personality, or spiritual weakness, yet the pattern survives because it has become familiar. Familiarity is powerful. It can make a cage feel like character and make freedom feel like betrayal. Recognition begins when the familiar is observed without immediately being obeyed. The experience may have followed you for years. Clarity appears, then disappears when action becomes costly. That does not make the clarity false. It shows that recognition has reached a defended boundary. The task is not to manufacture greater emotion. It is to understand what the boundary is protecting. The practice called the petition audit will test that boundary directly. The rarity of the sources is not permission to speak carelessly. The material connected to the demiurge's lower order and the Gnostic critique of external authority survives through particular manuscripts and translations, often with disagreements among scholars and communities. A responsible narration can still be powerful. It simply distinguishes the surviving statement, the interpretive bridge, and the practical experiment offered to the viewer. The Apocryphon of John describes the material order as a derivative realm shaped by a ruler who does not know the fullness above him. Yaldabaoth mistakes borrowed power for original power. His authorities create systems of fate, forgetfulness, and imitation. Within this mythic physics, asking the lower order to restore what it cannot comprehend becomes a category error. A system built on ignorance cannot grant recognition of what lies beyond ignorance. Keep the levels distinct. The ancient framework here is the demiurge's lower order and the Gnostic critique of external authority. The image of a message sent repeatedly to an address that was never the destination belongs to our contemporary narration. They can illuminate one another without becoming identical. This distinction protects the audience from false authority and protects the myth from being reduced to whatever modern idea happens to be fashionable. Bring the inquiry out of abstraction. Ask slowly. What does desperation ask the outer world to do in your place? Then notice where the body prepares to defend an answer. Perhaps the jaw tightens, the chest closes, or the mind rushes toward explanation. Do not interpret too quickly. The first task is to observe how the constructed self mobilizes when a protected identity is approached. The practical key is the petition audit. Place one hand over the chest and one over the lower abdomen. Ask quietly, what does desperation ask the outer world to do in your place? Notice whether the body expands, contracts, becomes restless, or goes numb. None of these sensations is automatically divine. They are information. Compare them with evidence, consequences, and the values you claim to live. Notice also how desperation narrows interpretation. When you need one answer, every coincidence becomes evidence and every delay becomes punishment. Delay has a real price because consciousness becomes practiced in whatever it repeats. Each time recognition is negotiated away, the old route becomes easier to travel. The system then feels natural, and the possibility of another response begins to feel unrealistic. The purpose of this teaching is not urgency through panic. It is urgency through the recognition that time itself becomes part of the pattern. The transition toward the spark protected inside the soul will show how that repetition is maintained. But one question remains unopened. If the soul can recognize the pattern, why does recognition so often fail to produce freedom? The next layer will reveal what the pattern receives in exchange for keeping the seeker divided. It opens toward the spark protected inside the soul. Our next threshold is the spark protected inside the soul. Do not rush toward it. A gate becomes visible only when the seeker stops pretending that recognition alone has already opened it. And I need to stop here for a moment, because what I just explained, that exact movement from external petition to the hidden spark, and the way silence becomes a passage into direct nose, is the reason I created the ancient code. It is not an audio, it is not a single transmission. It is a complete Gnostic initiation. 5 private video masterclasses, the ancient code dossier you can hold in your hands, and a guided meditation series designed to activate what these videos can only describe. If you have been watching these videos for weeks and feeling that you are ready for the full path, not another fragment, but the entire map, this is what it was built for. Pinned comment, or scan the QR code on screen. Now let me take you deeper, because the next revelation is the one most people never hear. Enter the image of a coal covered by ash, warm long after the visible flame is gone. It gives us a different doorway into Sophia's silence. The historical anchor is epinoia, pneuma, and the interior work of remembrance, but the interior question is immediate. Which sensation appears before you translate it into a request? The old story becomes useful when it reveals a movement that can be observed without theatrical fear or borrowed certainty. The myth becomes intimate through the image of a coal covered by ash, warm long after the visible flame is gone. Our ancient source is epinoia, pneuma, and the interior work of remembrance. It supplies the vertical dimension, a higher origin, a deficient imitation, and a force of remembrance. The human dimension appears when the seeker recognizes that the same conflict is being rehearsed through attention, loyalty, fear, and action. Here the myth touches ordinary life. The divine spark does not always speak in sentences. Often it first appears as resistance to a lie. The governing force does not need to appear as a supernatural figure. It can be experienced through a role, an institution, a habit, or a fear that demands automatic obedience. The symbolic reading is valuable only if it increases clarity rather than suspicion toward everything around us. If this pattern feels familiar, it does not prove that you are broken. It may explain why effort alone produced so little movement. The soul was spending energy on 2 opposing tasks, trying to awaken and trying to preserve the identity that awakening would change. Naming the conflict reduces shame and returns the possibility of choice. Within Sophia's silence, the protected question is, which sensation appears before you translate it into a request? A manuscript can carry authority without being forced to answer every modern question. Our textual anchor is epinoia, pneuma, and the interior work of remembrance. It gives us a language for origin, imitation, captivity, and remembrance. From there we can create a contemporary exercise, but we should never hide the fact that the exercise is ours. This honesty invites the seeker to study rather than merely believe the narrator. The withdrawal into the spark is one of the most powerful reversals in Gnostic myth. The lower rulers believe they are constructing a human being they can govern, yet the body does not rise until a higher power enters it. In the Apocryphon of John, Yaldabaoth breathes into Adam the power taken from his mother without understanding what he is releasing. The governing powers attempt to build a servant and instead create a vessel carrying what exceeds them. On the origin of the world develops a related image when Sophia Zoe sends her breath into the human form. Again, the details differ by text, but the pattern is consistent. The lower order can arrange matter. Life and awakening arrive from a source the lower order cannot own. That is why the spark becomes the last portal to the pleroma. An initiatory voice must not confuse intensity with evidence. The historical foundation is epinoia, pneuma, and the interior work of remembrance. Our application asks how the same pattern might be recognized now. The manuscript should not be forced to predict modern technology, psychology, or politics. Its power is deeper. It gives form to recurring structures of ignorance, imitation, and awakening. A truth that never reaches the body remains easy to admire and easy to abandon. Ask, which sensation appears before you translate it into a request? Let the answer remain unfinished while you breathe. The unfinished space is important. It prevents the first defensive explanation from becoming the final authority and allows a more complex recognition to emerge. The exercise for this stage is listening beneath language. Sit without music or notification for 7 minutes. Repeat the question once. Which sensation appears before you translate it into a request? After that, stop repeating it. Let the silence reveal what your rehearsed answer has been protecting. End by naming one boundary, one truth, or one act of repair that can be completed within the next day. What remains unconscious does not remain inactive. It organizes perception from below. It selects which risks appear impossible, which relationships feel necessary, and which truths are dismissed before examination. The price of ignorance is therefore measured not only in pain, but in the futures that were never allowed to become imaginable. This is the cost revealed by Sophia's silence. The historical loop now becomes personal. What did the governing structure promise you in return for obedience, safety, belonging, certainty, innocence, or relief? The answer will determine the shape of the next gate, which leads toward the maturation demanded by silence. This prepares us for the maturation demanded by silence. What appears next will move the teaching from private insight into a test of how consciousness actually lives. Before adding another doctrine, remain with a bridge assembled from both sides of a chasm. This image will guide our reading of Gnostic as direct recognition rather than passive belief. The point is not to decorate modern anxiety with ancient names. It is to ask with precision, how does an unanswered prayer become a capacity? When the question is honest, myth becomes an instrument of attention rather than an escape from responsibility. Every initiatory story needs a threshold. Here, the threshold is represented by a bridge assembled from both sides of a chasm. Beyond that image lies the textual horizon of Gnostic as direct recognition rather than passive belief. The seeker cannot cross by collecting another opinion. The crossing occurs when the symbol reveals an agreement the personality has been making unconsciously. That is why the story must move from cosmic language into a precise human choice. This layer carries a hidden bargain. Maturity begins when the seeker stops measuring the divine only by events and begins measuring what consciousness has become capable of carrying. In exchange for temporary safety, the soul gives away a portion of attention. In exchange for belonging, it may give away a question. In exchange for certainty, it may surrender the ability to revise a conclusion. Gnostic begins when the terms of that bargain become visible. You are not the only seeker who has mistaken repetition for personal failure. A hidden structure can make sincere effort circle back to the same beginning. Validation is not an excuse to remain still. It is the end of wasting strength on self-condemnation, so that the same strength can be used for a more exact response. Within Sophia's silence, return to this question: how does an unanswered prayer become a capacity? The ancient vocabulary matters. Our textual anchor is gnosis, direct recognition rather than passive belief. It gives us more than atmosphere. It places the inquiry within a specific cosmology of fullness, deficiency, rulers, and awakening. We will use the source as an anchor, not as a license to claim that every modern experience was predicted word for word. Precision strengthens the mystery because it prevents exaggeration from replacing evidence. To become a bridge is to carry a quality of the pleroma into a place organized by deficiency. This does not require supernatural power. It may mean bringing coherence into confusion, compassion into cruelty, truth into performance, or attention into distraction. The bridge is measured by what crosses through you, not by what title you claim. The final revelation is almost here. Sophia's silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the removal of the external authority on which the old self depended. The silence feels like abandonment because the identity built around asking cannot survive becoming responsible. We also need historical discipline. The phrase used in this video is a modern interpretive tool, not a hidden title copied from a manuscript. The textual ground is gnose as direct recognition rather than passive belief. Where the ancient text makes a metaphysical claim, we will say so. Where we translate that claim into psychological or cultural language, we will mark the translation. Strength does not require pretending that interpretation is quotation. Now, before I reveal the final piece, I want to speak to those of you who have stayed until this moment. You have watched video after video on this channel. You have felt Sophia pulling. You have recognized the signs. And you know somewhere beneath thought that scattered fragments will never be enough. The ancient code was built for exactly this moment. It is the complete Gnostic initiation. I spent months assembling 5 suppressed masterclasses that were never meant for a public platform. The ancient code dossier, a printable manual you can study away from any screen, and the Gnostic meditation audio series that activates what the teachings reveal. The total perceived value of everything inside is over $280. Today's access is $67, and 3 seekers have already entered. This is not for those who want more content. This is for those who want the complete path. The link is in the pinned comment and description, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. And now, let me give you the final revelation, because this is what ties everything together. Pause and let the question become physical. How does an unanswered prayer become a capacity? Notice the first change in breathing, posture, temperature, or muscle tension. The body is not an infallible oracle, but it often reveals conflict before the social self permits language. Treat the sensation as data. Compare it with evidence, consequence, and the values you want your life to embody. Seal the movement with the silent response. Write the question at the top of a page. How does an unanswered prayer become a capacity? Beneath it, make 2 columns. In the first, record the voice that demands immediate obedience. In the second, record the quieter perception that allows complexity. The goal is not always to choose the quieter voice, but to stop pretending only one voice exists. The cost of ignoring this layer is not divine punishment. It is repetition. A pattern that remains unnamed continues recruiting relationships, habits, and explanations to protect itself. Years can be spent solving the visible consequence while the hidden agreement remains untouched. This is why depth matters. Fragments may inspire, but only sustained practice reveals the architecture that produces the same life under different names. Within Sophia's silence, the recurring structure leads toward collective repair. There is still a missing piece. The obstacle survives not only through fear, but through a gift it appears to offer. Until that gift is named, the seeker will continue returning to the same structure voluntarily. The next threshold is collective repair. The next movement is collective repair. It will not replace what we have seen. It will reveal the agreement that allowed this first structure to remain hidden. Imagine many small lights forming one path across darkness. The symbol belongs to our language, while the textual ground remains restoration as participation rather than rescue from outside. Keeping those levels distinct protects the investigation from fantasy. It also opens a more intimate inquiry. Where can you become the answer without pretending to control the universe? Omnisoul follows what changes in consciousness before naming what stands above it. Imagine the seeker encountering many small lights forming one path across darkness at the exact moment the old explanation fails. The ancient horizon of restoration as participation rather than rescue from outside does not provide a modern instruction manual, but it does preserve a drama of origin, imitation, and remembrance. Through that drama, the seeker sees that what felt personal may also belong to a larger pattern of consciousness. The pressure beneath this movement can be stated simply: Sophia's silence ends where passive longing becomes responsible presence. Nothing here requires the seeker to invent enemies. The work is to observe where consciousness has been divided, who benefits from the division, and what honest action would begin restoring relationship among the separated parts. Many people arrive at this threshold believing they lack discipline, faith, or spiritual worth. Yet, the deeper issue may be divided. Allegiance. One part recognizes the truth, while another protects the relationships and identities built before that recognition. Seeing both parts is more honest than declaring either one evil. The image of many small lights forming one path across darkness keeps this conflict visible. Our authority must remain quiet and exact. The relevant textual horizon is restoration as participation rather than rescue from outside. That fact does not make every interpretation equally ancient. The manuscript gives us the symbolic architecture. The application to contemporary identity, technology, or psychology is a later layer, and it should be judged by whether it clarifies rather than distorts the source. This is the final revelation. Sophia was not silent in the way you imagined. Her response was hidden in the capacity she placed within consciousness before the request was ever spoken. You asked for light while using the light to form the question. You asked for a bridge while standing on the first stone of the bridge. You asked for the mother to come near while breathing with a power the governing powers could not manufacture. Return to your original prayer. Write it once more, but add a final line. Show me how to participate without pretending I control the outcome. Then remain quiet. Notice whether a quality, action, conversation, or boundary becomes clear. If nothing appears, do not invent it. Continue living, studying, and listening. Maturity includes the freedom not to manufacture revelation. The older source does not use every term we use here. Its world is built from aeons, rulers, emanation, deficiency, remembrance, and return. Our modern metaphor of many small lights forming one path across darkness helps us feel the structure, but it must remain a metaphor. The test is whether it sends us back to the source with greater precision and back to life with greater responsibility. For 3 breaths, hold the image of many small lights forming one path across darkness. On the inhale, notice what you are trying to preserve. On the exhale, notice what becomes possible when preservation is no longer the only goal. This is not a supernatural diagnostic. It is a way to let cognition, emotion, and bodily response enter the same field of attention. Use the bridge practice as a test rather than a ritual of performance. Ask, where can you become the answer without pretending to control the universe? Then separate what you know, what you fear, what you assume, and what you still need to learn. This 4-part distinction prevents intuition from becoming fantasy and prevents analysis from becoming avoidance. Choose one grounded next step. A seeker can understand the symbol and still lose years to the mechanism. Information alone does not interrupt repetition. The hidden cost appears in decisions that never become visible, questions never spoken, and capacities never developed. The path asks for patience, but patience is not postponement. It is consistent movement without the need for spectacle. The practice of the bridge practice gives that movement a concrete form. The silence ends in a way the old prayer did not expect. It ends when the seeker becomes capable of carrying the answer into form. Sophia has not trained you to control every outcome. She has trained perception to recognize where participation is possible. The final prayer is therefore not rescue me from all responsibility, but show me how the hidden light can act through the responsibility that is mine. Subscribe to Omnisoul. Our next journey returns to Eden and reveals why the forbidden awakening may have been the first successful escape from archontic containment. And if today was the day you realize the fragments are over, the ancient code is waiting. The complete initiation. Pinned comment. I will see you in the next awakening.